how do we change?
Nope, that's my back camera.
Ooh, that was how we wanted it to be, though, right?
That's upside down.
But your
What if I just
camera
hold it
wasn't.
like this? It's perfect.
Well, can you? Oh nope, that's boobs.
It's live.
Oh.
Okay, we can do it like that. That's right.
Okay, that's.
I'm gonna crop that part out for you.
Okay, thank you. And you. Right there. Wait,
maybe I should go where I can see those things though.
Please, my eyes is recording, so don't be naughty.
Well, and why are you putting it at this table?
Because I need to be able to get out of that. What do you think, Eileen? How does it look now?
I see you outside.
Terry's missing so much fun. But Terry's missing so much fun.
How's Riley doing? How's Riley doing? She's all over.
So now we're all going.
It smells good.
It's Heidi, it's just the way No, you go ahead.
I appreciate the Guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for being here. Getting settled in. All right. There's a clipboard going around for you to sign in, so if you'll just sign that for us, that helps us keep track of who's been here and who's gone through the training. I want to go ahead and introduce Victoria Strong. I have to share. I've known Victoria for a long time, and it's just so wonderful when your paths cross again. So I had Victoria's daughter, Riley, in my class at Oberon with Steve's daughter. And just such a wonderful class with so many kids that I just adored so much. And it's just so wonderful to have that connection. And Victoria and I actually got to go on a trip together. We took the kids out east. And so we had all kinds of fun, driving all over the East Coast. Yeah, it's a great time. Yeah, it was fun. So it's just fun to have her back and to be in this situation where she can come and share what she does for a living to help support our kiddos in our community. So thank you for being here.
I'm so glad you're back.
Yes.
Yeah, we were here when Zach Barton was the principal. I think it was 2016 was the last time we were here. So we're so happy to be back. Jeffco schools are my heart. I grew up in Jeffco. My kids went to Jeffco. So I'm so glad that we get to serve Jeffco schools. It's so awesome. So thank y'all for coming. I don't know if this is your normal meeting time. Is this a total different thing that you're doing?
Pretty close. We're usually on Wednesdays, but we switched to Thursday.
Okay, perfect. So y'all use the after school today. Sometimes when I meet with teachers, it's like an additional after school day, and they're just not very happy with me. So we'll get through this information. Hopefully it'll be really good information. How many of you were here back in 2016 when we had this presentation? So a few of you. Okay, it'll be a good reminder for you. The rest of you, I'll tell you all about the CAP program, the work I've been doing for about 26 years, and how we're going to bring this into the classroom and how what that looks like. And we start with the kiddos on the 22nd of February, I believe, and then go into March. So we'll finish up, I think, before spring break. All right, so as Michelle said, my name is Victoria Strong, and I'm the executive director of a pretty small nonprofit organization. We're based right here in Arvada, and it's called the Front Range Center for Assault Prevention. The name is really giant, but we're not. We're very small. I'm the only full-time paid staff. I have 3 part-time paid facilitators. I have a volunteer bookkeeper and a volunteer board of directors. So we're pretty tiny, but we are a part of a much larger organization called the International Center for Assault Prevention, which is based in New Jersey. And so we're one of many projects all over the world. We have CAP projects in about 27 states in the United States and about 13 or 14 countries around the world. So this program is taught in many of the schools. We teach all across the Front Range of Colorado, so all the major school districts. So we're talking all the Adams counties, Boulder, Broomfield, Jeffco, Weld County, Summit, and even up into the mountain communities, and Denver, of course, as well. So we serve about 20 schools in a given school year, which equates to about 5,000 kids. And over the past, with COVID hadn't happened to happen, we'd be in our 26th year, but we're really calling it 25 now. We've served about 125,000 kids. So, and their parents and their teachers. So I'm going to kind of go in and actually a little bit about myself. I have degrees in clinical psychology and child development. I also have a master's degree in forensic psychology and an MBA. And I've been doing this work for quite a while. I used to be a family therapist. I was based in the middle school in Adams County and did treatment with families and kids and adolescents for many years. And then in late 1995, I went to a conference in the Bay Area in San Francisco. And I came across the CAP program. And I had no idea what it was, never heard of it. Walked in and it changed my life. I think it's a fabulous program, not only for us as professionals, but also as a mom. I thought, you know what, this is what we need. We don't have anything like this in Colorado, and so I want to bring it here. So we did, and we started it in Adams County, and now it's kind of spread all over the Front Range. As Michelle said, I have 3 kids. I'm a mom, so this work is really important to me. I also am a grandmother. I have 3 grandkids, and Riley is my baby, so she's the little one. She's a nurse at Children's Hospital now, and she's actually being trained as a SANE nurse, which is pretty cool. SANE nurses are sexual abuse nurse examiners, so I don't know where she got that idea from, but she's being trained as a SANE nurse as well. The program, though, actually started way back in 1978. And what happened was there was a little parochial school that was nestled in this neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio. And this little 2nd grade girl was walking home from school, like she did every single day. And on her way home, she was lured into a neighbor's house, where he then sexually assaulted her, threatened her not to tell anyone, and then sent her on her way home. Well, thank goodness she was able to tell right away what had happened, even though she had been threatened to keep it silent. And her parents did exactly what they should have done, which was to call the authorities. They reported the incident, there was an investigation, and then later on, a conviction of this perpetrator. Well, when something like this happens in a community, of course, everyone was outraged. The children began to exhibit signs of trauma. They were afraid to go to and from school. They were afraid to go to the park and play. Parents were letting kids get together, no play dates or sleepovers. And the parents did what us grown-ups do when kids are hurt, is they began to hover. They wouldn't let their kids out of their sight. And it became a really unhealthy situation, not only for the kids, but also for the adults in their lives. So they went to an organization in Columbus called WAR. It was a community organization much like ours. Sally Cooper was the director there. And WAR stood for Women Against Rape. So it was a nonprofit similar to ours. And they went to Sally and said, hey, we need some help. Can you come into our school, provide some strengthening, empowering, healing information so we can begin to heal from this situation and try to prevent it? Well, Sally back then, especially in 1978, they were not talking to young people about this issue. They were barely talking to adult women survivors. And that was after the fact, of course, when they were already hurt. So doing this was something new. So she got together a whole bunch of different professionals and put together this team to try and figure out how to address this issue. And they came up with the first CAP curriculum. They did it, they piloted in this parochial school. It was very successful there. And then, of course, spread all over the state of Ohio and now all over the world. So I met Sally Cooper, probably about 10 years ago. And for me, it was like meeting, I don't even know, like Elvis or something, or Bon Jovi. You know, it was like, it was the coolest thing I could have done, was to meet Sally Cooper. And she had no idea when she started this is what would happen. But what that means and what that pointed out was that we really need this type of programming. We need this education in our schools for the adults primarily, and then also we bring kids onto the prevention team so they can learn how to stay safe, strong, and free also. Okay, so the program has three really important components. The first is, of course, the staff training, which is what we're doing today. This evening, hopefully we'll have tons of parents show up. It's the hardest part of what we do. But tonight is the parent training, which will be similar to this, except that have, a parent tilt on it, of course, instead of educator tilt. And then we do classroom by classroom student workshops, okay? We would never come in and bring a whole grade or the entire school into the auditorium and teach them all at once. We believe this information is important enough, and it's also sensitive enough that we want to do instruction in their classroom, okay? Individually with their teacher there in their learning environment. So we go classroom by classroom by classroom, okay? So oftentimes, and my husband who's in the financial world, used to say, he doesn't anymore, but he used to say, it'd be so much more cost effective to just bring all the kids. Bring them all, do it, and then you can serve so many more kids. And I had to finally, he came to the program, he understood what we were doing and said, yeah, you're right. We have to do it classroom by classroom. So that's why we do that. So we'll be here for about 2.5 to 3 weeks before we get through all of the different classrooms. We serve about 2 to 3 a day. And hopefully you've all seen the schedule. Have you all seen your name on the schedule somewhere? Okay. So that's kind of how the format is when we come into every school. Now during the student workshop, we're going to be covering the 3 most common types of assault that a child might experience in their lifetime. We'll be talking to them about bullying behaviors, stranger awareness, and we don't say stranger danger. We ask that grown-ups don't say that anymore either, because that implies that all strangers are dangerous, and that's just not true. Most of the people in our world are good, safe people, and we want kids to know that, okay? Our program is not fear-based, it's empowerment-based. So we want kids to know that most people are good people, and they may need to go to a stranger for help someday. And if they keep hearing that phrase, stranger danger, then they're not going to go to anybody for the help that they need in that moment. Okay, so we call it stranger awareness. And then the third piece we'll be talking to the kids about is the issue of sexual abuse, okay, body safety, that kind of thing. So in the workshop, each one of those issues is given equal time. However, when we talk to adults, we are a sexual abuse prevention organization. That's where our roots come from. So with the adult trainings, we cover that last piece, the sexual abuse piece. We do that for 2 really important reasons. The first is it's the most common type of assault that a child might experience in their lifetime. And lots of people don't know that. There's a lot of myths around this issue. So a lot of people don't know how common it really is. We'll talk about some statistics in a minute. Also because it's the most silenced. It's the one that people don't want to talk about. And that's understandable. Who wants to sit around and talk about sexual abuse? And over the years, I've gotten a little bit more comfortable doing that. But still, even now, after 27, 28 years doing this work, it's still a hard thing to talk about. And it's a hard thing to listen to. So as we're talking about this, please take care of yourselves. If you need to get out and take a break, go to the bathroom, that kind of thing, please do so. Because, again, this is an issue that's very sensitive and hard to talk about. With that said, I know that the statistics are showing we probably have survivors here in the room with us today. As a matter of fact, I know we do, because I am a survivor as well. And so it's so important that if we have questions or comments, that we make sure we voice them with sensitivity, knowing that we do have survivors here in the room today. It's totally okay to ask questions. Please do so. I'm not a formal speaker. It's actually really uncomfortable for me to stand up here in front of all of you. I'd much rather be sitting at a table with you. So if you have something, pressing, please let me know, and we'll address it right then, okay? I'll also be here afterwards. We're doing the parent training this evening, but not until 5:30. So I'll be here in case you need to address something more in private, okay? All right, so with that said, I am going to jump in and give you a lot of information about the issue of child sexual abuse. And what I'd like to start with is a definition of what we consider to be sexual abuse, okay? The definition that we use is any forced, exploitative, or coercive sexual contact or experience with the child, right? Now, by child, we mean someone who's 17 years old or younger. There isn't an age group of children that are more or less vulnerable to this issue, right? We're all vulnerable to this issue. But the most important part to remember is that we're not powerless to prevent it. There are a lot of things that we can do as adults, as parents, as teachers, to educate ourselves and our kids so they don't ever have to become a statistic that we'll talk about in a little bit, okay? Included in this definition is the word forced. Oftentimes when people think of sexual abuse and they think of that word forced, they oftentimes think of physical force, like a perpetrator has to physically force their victim, right? Unfortunately, with the issue of children, that force is not necessary. Very often, perpetrators do not have to physically force. The force is more emotional, mental, coercion, trickery, bribes. It's that kind of force that's going along with this issue, which is one of the reasons why it's so hard to detect, right? Because there may not be outward signs. There may not be bruises or marks or broken bones, things we see when children are physically abused. So that's why it's so important that we talk to our kids about this, like we do every other type of issue that they could face. Unfortunately, we don't talk about it as much, and that's why our kids are so vulnerable. So we have to kind of start that conversation, which is what we're doing today, okay? Included in this definition are things like molestation, which is forced touch, rape, which is forced intercourse, incest, which is sex amongst family members. We also take that a step further to also include if there was a boyfriend or girlfriend of the parent living in the home and they were an authority figure, we would include that in the incestual situation as well, even though they're not biologically related, okay? Voyeurism, exhibitionism, pornography, and forced prostitution. So they're pretty large continuum of what we consider to be child sexual abuse. On one end, we would think of fondling or molestation. On the other, we would think of rape. Now, there's a lot of things in between there that often people don't consider. We want to really have a good idea of what it is that we're talking about. We're talking about those two extremes and then also in the middle, okay? Any questions about that definition? Anything at all? It is really warm in here. I don't know if y'all are warm like I am or no, maybe you're having a hot flash. Comes along with the mid-50s. Okay, so let's move on and talk about some statistics. What we currently know, and these are national statistics, and we know that Colorado falls within these national averages, is that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually assaulted at least once before the age of 18. 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys. Now, I've done a lot of research because I have a lot of boys in my life. I've got 2 sons and 3 grandbabies or 3 grandsons, and I've always been curious about that statistic. Why is it that it's more prevalent in girls than it is in boys? And what I found pretty much across the board is that that's not true. Even though the statistic is that way, what we know is that sexual assault is a very, very hard situation to report, okay? It's very hard for any victim to report, regardless of their age. But it's even harder for male victims to come forward and report. So even though they may be as vulnerable as our girls, they're not reporting as often because of that stigma of vulnerability, okay? So we have to make sure we're not only addressing our girl population, but our boy population as well. We have to make sure that they're all being taught how to stay safe, okay? We also know that most of the time, perpetrators of sexual abuse are known to the child. Current statistic is about 92%, which means it's someone in that child's life, someone who has regular daily access to them, okay? So we hear about the stranger stuff that happens and that can occur. But for the most part, when we're talking about sexual abuse, It's mostly perpetrated by people our children know, people that we know. Okay? We also know that most of the time sexual perpetrators are men. And when I say most, it's 97% is the current statistic. Doesn't mean that all of our men are hurting our kids, of course not. But for whatever reason, when a man chooses to violate a child, it's often through sexual means. Okay? And this also isn't just an issue of adults hurting kids. This is an issue of kids being hurt by other kids, by adolescents, and by adults. Okay? And here in Colorado, we actually have a pretty large population of adolescent perpetrators. Okay? So if you were to take all the perpetrators that have been convicted of a sexual crime, that's not all the perpetrators by any means, but the ones who have been convicted of a sexual crime, you put them in a room, okay? About 35% of that population is going to be under the age of 18. Within that 35%, most of those are going to be between the ages of 12 and 15, right? So we're trying to work on and figure out as a community what's going on there. But we have a pretty high population of young adolescent perpetrators here in Colorado, okay? Last statistic is really about reporting, and it's one of the things that we try and work on every day in this field. We want people to know that if they're ever feeling sad, scared, or unsafe, they have the right to tell, which means they have the right to report it, right? But unfortunately, most sexual assault cases go unreported to the authorities. And the current statistic is about 87% go unreported to the authorities. So if someone is sexually assaulted or hurt in this way, why do you think they wouldn't report it to the authorities? They might tell their best friend or their mom or their partner, but actually reporting it to an authority, which means there can be an investigation and a possible conviction. Why wouldn't they take it to that step? What do you think? Yes?
The fear of testifying.
Absolutely. There's a tremendous amount of fear, and not only because of what's going on inside of them, because of the guilt and shame that they feel for being a victim in this way, but also because perpetrators will say to them, if you tell, I'm going to hurt you. Or if you tell, I'm going to hurt your mommy. Or if you tell, really bad things are going to happen. So there's a lot of fear, a lot of shame that goes into this issue. What else? Why else do you think someone wouldn't report?
Is the connection they have with that person?
Absolutely. Especially with our kids. They are such loyal creatures, right? And even though they want what's happening to stop, oftentimes they won't report it because they, out of loyalty to the person who's hurting them. Which sounds really crazy, but we see that all the time. We see it all the time. They care about that person, they love that person, often sometimes even depend on that person for daily life. This bad thing is happening, and they endure it because they don't want to get that other person in trouble, or they don't want that person to go away. Right? That's how loyal our kids are. So there's also the issue of blame, which runs very deep in our society, especially when we're talking about sexual abuse. For whatever reason, oftentimes victims get blamed for this happening to them, okay? And even children. Now, it's so hard for us as adults who care about kids to wrap our mind around the idea that someone would hurt a child in this way, that for whatever reason, we figure out a way to put the blame onto the child, at least some of it. We may say things to them like, well, why did you walk through the park on the way home? See what happens when I told you that wasn't safe? Or why did you sit on the babysitter's lap and play that yucky touching game? You know that's not okay. Or why did you let Uncle so-and-so touch your private parts in the bathroom? What were you thinking? We figure out a way to take that blame and place it on the child's shoulders, okay? And if you leave with nothing else here today, I hope you leave truly believing and understanding that there's absolutely nothing a victim can do to bring this onto themselves. Absolutely nothing. No short skirts, no amount of alcohol, nothing, right? When we do our Team CAP program for middle and high school kids, we talk a lot about victim blaming and victim empathy. We also talk a lot about consent and what that looks like, right? But there's absolutely nothing a victim can do to bring this onto themselves. Absolutely nothing, okay? We do, however, still blame victims. So if, we were parked out in the parking lot and we forgot to lock our car and someone broke into it and stole everything out of it. We think, oh man, why didn't that person lock their car? That was dumb, right? Instead of saying, why did that person break into that car and steal everything? So we have to start shifting that thinking, okay? Especially when we're talking about victims of sexual abuse, right? This happens oftentimes also in our judicial system. It's not perfect. We have a far from perfect judicial system. But when something like this is brought to their attention, so let's say there's a report, and then there's an investigation, and then they actually decide to take it to trial, which very rarely happens. Most of these cases are plea bargained, or there's not enough evidence, or the victim is deemed not a credible witness. Something happens and it doesn't make it to trial. But there's a case that we like to have as an example of blame. It happened back in 1982 in Wisconsin. There was a judge by the name of Judge Renicky, and a case came through his courtroom. Now, those of you who know the answer to this, don't yell it out. But a case like this came through the courtroom. And after all the evidence was heard, Judge Renicky said, there's no doubt in my mind that this was the fault of this seductive young lady, the victim. And so the man was acquitted. Okay? So how old do you think a seductive young lady must be in order for it to be her fault? How old would she have to be? What do you think? Say again? Older adolescent, at least,
18.
right? Okay.
18.
15, 16, sometimes people say 22, not that there's a magic age that we need to know about, because there isn't, right? But in this situation, this little girl was 5. She went to kindergarten, first time out of the house, right? Within 2 weeks of being in kindergarten, she disclosed to her teacher what was going on. That she had crawled in her daddy's lap, he became aroused, he molested her for quite a period of time, threatened her not to tell anybody, of course, it was their little secret. But when she went to kindergarten, she just kind of matter-of-factly mentioned something to her teacher. And like kids do all the time, right? They just kind of matter-of-factly came out in conversation, and it was reported, investigated, and then he was acquitted because the judge thought it was her fault, right? Crazy. I know. We hope things like that don't still happen, but they do, okay? Victims are still being blamed all over the place. And we've seen some pretty high-profile cases come through even our state in the last couple of years, and then also nationally on the national media and things like that. So we need to really understand that there's nothing anyone can do to bring this onto themselves. And when we blame victims, we're telling sexual perpetrators, go ahead and do what you're going to do, right? We're not going to hold you accountable. We're going to hold the victim at least partially accountable, and then probably not you at all, right? So we need to be really careful about that blame issue. So let's talk a little bit about telling. We know that if we empower our kids to talk to us about things, good communication is the number-1 prevention tool that we can offer to our children. And if we empower them to tell, are they coming this way? If we empower them to tell if they're feeling sad, scared, or unsafe, they will, and they do. Okay, we are not here at Vanderhoof to weed out abused children. That's not why we come. We have had reports come out of Vanderhoof in the past, and we've had about 800 cases reported directly to myself or my staff since the year 2000. So we started really counting. So for the last 21 and some years, we've had over 800 cases reported to us. Most of those cases were sexual abuse situations. We also get physical abuse kinds of reports, drugs and alcohol in the home, domestic violence. So we get lots of other types. But sexual abuse is really the most common report that we get, okay? But we also know that kids, there's some really good reasons why they may not tell, right? As we talked about before, it's very difficult for a victim to come forward. And the reason is because not only has the perpetrator said to them, if you tell, really bad things are gonna happen, right? But they're also, again, very loyal, very trusting, and there's lots of reasons why they may not tell. So we need to make sure kids our kids are know. I'm having a hard time today. I've been teaching all day, just like all of you, so I think I've used up all my words. So they're saying, no more. Okay, if we tell our children that they have the right to tell when they're ever feeling sad, scared, or unsafe, then they will. Now I'm gonna say that to the grown-ups tonight about 10 times, and hopefully it'll start to register with them as, oh, I should probably tell my kids that, right? If you ever feel sad, scared, or unsafe, you have the right to tell. Now, they may not be able to tell mommy or daddy. They may not, but they might be able to tell their teacher at school, right? Or their best friend's mom, or their bus driver in a conversation on the way home, right? Or their doctor, if their doctor's asking the right questions at a pediatric visit, right? They might be able to tell someone. So we want to make sure our kids know they have lots of people in their world that they can go tell if they ever need help. One of the things we're going to hand out tonight to the parents is a safety rules flyer. And it talks about having a support network. All of us need to have support networks, right? Even as grown-ups, we need to have people we can count on, call and talk to when we're having a hard time with something. Well, kids need that too. And again, we need to have more than just our grown-ups at home. people at school, people in church, people in sports, right? My daughter had some excellent coaches during her softball career that she was able to go talk to if she ever needed help with something. And I didn't mind that at all because I wanted her to have other people besides us. If a perpetrator said, I'm going to hurt your mom, she's probably not going to tell me, right? But maybe she could tell her coach or her best friend's parent. So it doesn't matter who they tell as long as they tell someone, okay? So telling is a really important issue when we talk about prevention. And for teachers, I'm sure some of you in your career, if you've been teaching for a while, have had to make a report or have had a child come forward to them where there was a concern that needed to be reported, okay? Have you all had your mandated reporter training? Yes. So you all know that we are all mandated reporters, including us, right? And that we are required, we don't get to make a judgment on it. We are required to call if we suspect or know that there's a child who's in harm's way, right? So if a child were to come to you, there's some things that we suggest you do and some things we suggest you don't do. The first and most important thing is to stay as calm as you can, which is going to be the most unnatural thing you're going to have to do, especially if the child is like one of yours, is someone that you're emotionally connected to. We're emotionally connected to our students as well, but if it's someone in our care, it's going to be very difficult to stay calm. But if we start to rage and become angry, which would be the natural feeling to have when a child reports this, the child's going to internalize that and think you're angry with them. All of those messages that perpetrator has said to them are going to come flooding forward, right? Your grown-ups are going to think you're a bad little boy or girl. Your teacher's not going to believe you, right? All of these things that a perpetrator will say to a child to keep them silent. So we have to stay calm and listen to what the child is saying. If we say nothing else during the conversation other than, I believe you, 3 most important words we can say to a victim, that's fine. You don't have to say a whole lot. And as a matter of fact, authorities would prefer that we don't ask a lot of questions, that we just listen, take down the information, and then make that phone call if we need to report it, okay? But we have to tell the child that we believe them, because if we don't, that's a victim's biggest fear, is that they won't be believed, okay? Give the child positive messages, things like, I am so proud of you for coming to talk to me. I know that must have been really difficult or really hard, and you're so brave, right? We're going to do what we can to make sure that you're safe from here on out, okay? If the child is in your direct care, so not your students, but someone that's in your family or someone you have direct care over, if you suspect or the child has disclosed that there was any type of penetration of that child's body, either orally, anally, or vaginally, that we make sure we get the child checked out by a medical professional. When I mentioned that the SANE nurses, they're experts in this. Sex abuse nurse examiners, and all children's hospitals have them. And if you go to a hospital or a doctor that doesn't, you can request one. Okay, there's a whole network all across the United States of SANE nurses. But we need to have them examined for their body safety, first of all. Secondly, because we want to see if there's any type of evidence that we can collect. Evidence actually stays around for quite a while. Okay, as long as we don't bathe, allow the victim to shower, change their clothes. Of course, if it's happened, if they're reporting several days later, that's not an issue. But if it's something they're saying happened just recently, we also don't want them to eat or drink anything, because that can wash away evidence as well. Okay, so it's important though to have them examined by a medical professional. Some things we don't want people to do if a child is disclosing. Of course, try not to panic, right? Don't overreact in front of the child, because they're counting on you to handle this information. They may tell you little bits and pieces to test the water to see how you're going to react. Or they may just spill it all out there right on the table. And they lived through it, so it's really important for us as adults to be able to handle that, okay? So try not to panic and overreact. Make sure, especially if it's, oftentimes perpetrators are people in our families or our extended families or in our community. So it's super important that we don't go confront the offender, right? Especially with our child in tow. Johnny said on the play date over here this afternoon, this is what you did. Is that true? Well, the offender's probably not going to say, yeah, I did that, right? Also, it can put you and your child in danger, right? In great danger, because then the perpetrator will know the child has disclosed, and they know that's not good, right? So we want to allow the authorities to handle that confrontation, okay? And then the very last thing we want to make sure we never, ever do in any way, shape, or form is blame the victim for any part of what happened. They were manipulated, they were taken advantage of, right? Someone who had more power, either physical strength or otherwise, or someone who had more authority than them, They were manipulated. Okay, so it's super important that we don't in any way, shape, or form address the fact that maybe they had worn a skirt that was short. Or had they been drinking? None of those things matter. Did they walk through the park? Doesn't matter. What matters is that we need to keep our kids safe, right? And protect them. Okay? Any questions about those do's and don'ts or reporting as mandated reporters? Now, I know Jefferson County has a system that you go through a process when you're reporting to the authorities. You don't ever have to do it by yourself. I know that Michelle would be available. Do you have a counselor or psychologist here in the building? Yes, both of you? Okay, awesome. So they can come to you as well, correct? Yep. If they have a concern or something needs to be reported. But just know that if a child disclosed to you, you're the one who has to report it. You're the one. You can't take it to the psychologist or the social worker and say, here, right? They're going to need to talk to you anyway because you're the one the child disclosed to. They're going to want to know affect. They're going to want to know how the child was responding or reacting. They're going to want to know all those things that the other people didn't see or hear. So it's important that you are a part of that and that you make that a report, but you have those support people help you out. Okay? All right, so let's talk a little bit about the issue of lying. Now, sometimes when we come into a school, especially if we haven't been here for a while with a whole new group of parents and kids, oftentimes people are worried that if we start talking to children about these issues, that they're going to start fabricating or lying or making up stories about being sexually abused. And in my experience, in the last 30-some years, I've done this work. In the last 26, I've done prevention. I haven't experienced that. I just haven't. Young kids, and even some middle school age kids, don't have the language or the knowledge or the sophistication regarding sexual acts to be able to make it up. They just don't. Even in our world of, touch the button and all this information comes to us. They still don't have that information. If they do, if you have a child in your classroom who's just knows all this stuff about sexual activities, there's something going on that we need to, intervene in, right? But even then, for them to then say that this bad thing happened to them in a sexual assault experience is very, very rare. So as a professional, I'm not concerned about kids doing that. As teachers, I know that you may be a little bit more concerned about a child fabricating a story, but just know that if you're safe with kids, they're not going to say you're not. They just aren't. Now, if you're unsafe with kids, then they might say that, okay? And I've never had a kid, even in an experience as a middle school family therapist, where I had lots of really emotionally kind of disturbed or concerned kids in my office with the door shut, talking about some pretty emotional things, right? And never once, not one time had a kid say that I was doing anything unsafe to them, because I didn't, okay? So for a child to fabricate and lie that something like this is going on is very, very rare. Now, I was involved in a court case where a parent forced the child to lie about sexual abuse against the other parent during a custody battle, right? And it was very clear very quickly that came out that child was not telling the truth. Now, was that kid's lying? No. That's grown-ups forcing a kid to lie, which is different, right? For kids to have that language and be able to give details about body parts and body fluids and all of these things that they're able to give details about when they've experienced a sexual assault, kids just don't know that stuff unless something's happened. So we need to make sure we take that seriously, okay? Any questions about that lying piece? You all okay out there still? It's so hard with masks on because I can't tell. Everybody pull their mask on just for a second. Everybody okay? Okay, good, okay. It's so hard to see reaction. It's so hard to talk about this issue anyway. And then when you can't see people's faces, it's mind-blowing. So, okay, so let's talk a little bit about vulnerability. There's 3 reasons why people in general are vulnerable to these issues. The first is we lack information. We just don't know what we don't know, right? So it's super important that we give people information about these issues, that we talk about it, we have a conversation about it, we learn about it, we learn how to keep ourselves safe, learn some skills and strategies that we can use the rest of our life, then we're going to decrease vulnerability just because we know more, right? Second is that they're dependent on our care, right? Given their status as kids, they're powerless and dependent often. So we need to make sure we level that playing field just a little bit and give them a little more power to decide what happens to their bodies, okay? So sometimes we take this power away from our kids without even knowing it. So we may say things like, oh, look, Grandma's here to visit. You run over there and you give her a hug and a kiss. Well, in that moment, your child doesn't get to decide what happens to their bodies. They are experiencing someone with authority, someone who's older or bigger than them, saying to them, you have to go do this, right? That's a really scary message for kids. We believe that all people have a choice as to what happens to their bodies. You know, kids, adolescents, grown-ups, we all have a choice. And when we take that choice away, it's a very slippery slope, and it opens up that door to future vulnerability. Because someone besides you with more power and authority, who has unsafe intentions, could say the same thing. Oh, come sit on my lap and give me a hug and a kiss. Oh, come on, you're going to hurt my feelings. Remember what your grown-up said? You're not supposed to hurt people's feelings. Come give me a hug and a kiss. Come sit on my lap. And in that moment, the messages they've gotten is, I have to do this. I don't have a choice. And we don't want our kids to ever feel stuck like that. We want them to always know they have a choice, okay? So with my grandkids, you know, they're of all ages, so 12 and almost 4, and then a 2-year-old. They come running in, and the first thing they want to do is give Grandma and Grandpa, usually Grandpa first, because they run right past me again. But they want to give us a hug and a kiss, and they want to engage with us, and they want to talk to us, and you know, they want to sit on our laps and read books and things like that. That's a natural thing for kids to want to do, but we shouldn't force them. I would never want my boys to have their kids come in and say, you get on over there, you know, and you sit on Grandma's lap and give her a hug and a kiss. Even if Grandma has a cookie, you know, I'm not going to bribe them, I'm not going to force them, because I want them to do it, first of all, because they want to, right? Also, I want to set an example for other people in their life, knowing so that they know they don't have to do that if it's not their choice. So what we can say when we're not doing that to the grown-ups in our lives, like my parents who are from a different generation, my dad used to say, come on over here and sit on my lap. Come on, I want to talk to you. And now that he knows differently, you know, when we know better, we do better. Every once in a while, I'll still catch him kind of saying something like that. And I'll kind of look at him and go, what? No, what was that? And he'll say, oh, no, that's not what I meant to say. What I meant to say was, do you want to sit on Grandpa's lap? And can I have a hug and a kiss? Or do you want a hug and a kiss? Because that's a question that they get to answer yes or no, right? Implies they have a choice. So we have to make sure we're not forcing our kids to do those things, okay? And grandmas and grandpas will just have to understand, and aunties and uncles and whoever else wants hugs and kisses, that it's always their choice. It's not a sign of disrespect or not having manners, it's their choice. And they can do a high five, they can do, you know, special handshake, they can do a fist bump, lots of ways to acknowledge that person and show them that there's respect there, right? With our elders. We don't have to hug and kiss people. Yeah. I had an Esther that I used to have to hug and kiss. It was my dad's aunt. So she was like anciently old, really, really old, smelled horribly. I don't know what she did, but smelled not very nicely. And her, you know, ate a lot of pickles. I don't know what it was, but I was forced to go up and kiss her when I saw her, which was like once every, like, I don't even know, 5 years. Like, I didn't even know this person. And finally I said, no, I don't want to do that. And my mom told my dad, don't make her do that. That's not right. He wouldn't even give her a kiss, but he was forcing his kids to, right? I mean, what is going on? This is crazy. So we want to make sure that we're not making our kids do that. Another way that oftentimes we take our kids' power away is, let's say you have a babysitter this Friday night. You and your partner are going to go out and have fun, and you say to the kid in front of the babysitter, now look, I don't want to hear that you've misbehaved. I don't want to hear that you caused problems with the babysitter, that you need to mind. And if you don't, there's going to be some consequences, right? Well, we all say that in some form or fashion when we want our kids to mind. And actually, they mind a lot better if they do with those people than they do with us. Anyway, you leave. The babysitter says, well, we're going to play this fun touching game. And this molest situation begins. If your child doesn't know the difference between saying no to mommy and daddy when it's time for bed, or saying no to their teacher when it's time to sit down and do their work, both of those no's aren't okay, to saying no to someone who's making them unsafe, like the babysitter is right now, which is okay, right? If they don't know the difference between those two no's, they're in really big trouble. So we need to make sure kids know the difference, that it is okay sometimes to say no to someone who has more power and authority over them. And that time is when that person is making them unsafe in any way, shape, or form, right? They have the right to use that no, and we want them to, and we empower them to do it every time, okay? All right, so we think instead of saying something like that, we could say something like this to our kids. I know you're going to do a great job with the babysitter tonight while we're gone. Now, if anything happens that makes you feel sad, scared, or unsafe, that's the first thing we're going to talk about when we get back. And you're saying that right in front of the babysitter, or right in front of the soccer coach, or right in front of the chess club teacher, as I had to say when my son went to Moore Middle School, chess club. right? I do whenever my kids have gone to something where I wasn't allowed to be there, really. And come to find out, actually, that chess club teacher at Moore Middle School, he went for about 2 weeks, decided he didn't want to go anymore. I asked him why not, and he then progressed in telling me that there was unsafe things going on. The teacher made him feel very uncomfortable. Didn't touch him in any sexual way, but he had observed that with some of the other students in class. So of course, being me, mandated reporter, I reported it, and there were some things that were done. But we have to let people know who have the privilege of being with our kids without us there, that we're paying attention, right? We're paying attention, we're educated, our children are educated, and if they want to get away with anything like that, it's not going to happen with my kid, because my kid's going to tell me, and there's going to be a consequence for it, right? So we want to make sure our kids know they don't ever have to do that, okay? They don't ever have to keep that secret. Let's see. Moving on here, I know we've got about 15 more minutes. Couple quick things we're going to talk to the parents about tonight. No secret policy. I think it's super important that your kids know you have a no secret policy in your home, right? My oldest son is 35, and he still tells me things that maybe a 35-year-old could probably keep to himself about his relationship, and things like that. But he knows that, nothing's off the table. Anything they want to talk about to mom or to dad or whoever, they can do that. And that's because that's how we raise them, and they know that they can talk to us about anything, right? It's not shameful. They're not going to be blamed for anything. And even if they made a mistake, we're going to talk about it, right? So no secret policy goes a long way in keeping our kids safe, because then they know I just don't have an option. I just can't keep that a secret because I have a no secret policy, right? Let's see. Private parts discussion. Now we, in elementary school, starting with kindergarten, we do not specifically talk about private parts. In our preschool program, we do, because by the age of 4, we want our kiddos to know that if they're a girl, they have a vagina or a vulva. If they're a boy, they have a penis. We all have butts and chests and breasts and all those things. But unfortunately, as families, sometimes we call them funny little names. This is your wiggly worm, or your noodle, or your cookie, or your flower, right? Well, unfortunately, that puts kids makes them more vulnerable. So we had a little girl in kindergarten in Boulder, at Boulder School, and she had gone to her teacher and told her teacher that Johnny was sticking pencils in her cracker box. And so she told the teacher that, and the teacher's like, "Oh, that's okay, so we have lots more pencils." She had a bunch of, she had 25, 30 kids at that time in her kindergarten class. She just missed it. She was a great teacher, veteran teacher, loved, and she retired probably about 10 years ago. Wonderful teacher. She was mortified when she realized that she had missed it. Right? So then we did CAP in their classroom. Little girl came out, sat down in front of me and said, "Johnny's sticking pencils in my cracker box. I don't like it." I said, "Well, sweetie, what's your cracker box?" She pointed to her vagina. So we have the insertion of pencil in the vagina in kindergarten. And so, of course, as a mandated reporter, we reported that. And there were some situations that needed to be taken care of. But I guarantee you the teacher would have responded differently if she had said, "Johnny's sticking pencils in my vagina." Right? So it's important that our kids know what those things are. We don't have to call them funny things. This is my nose, these are my ears, this is my wiggly worm. No, it's not. It's your penis, right? So we need to make sure kids know what those are called. We will not address that unless they bring it up. If the kids bring it up, we'll talk about the proper names, but most of the time they don't. By the time they get to kindergarten, they hopefully know those things, and we'll have the parents tonight. If they don't, make sure they go tell them, right? All right, so let's talk a little bit about, any questions about any of that stuff? Okay, what we know about sexual abuse is that, with all the myths that surround it, it only happens in bad neighborhoods. It only happens to kids who aren't supervised. It happens to certain ethnicities or people in different cultures, and it definitely doesn't happen in my neighborhood, right? Those are all myths. They do. It happens in every neighborhood. We have perpetrators in this neighborhood. We have perpetrators in my neighborhood where I live. We have perpetrators everywhere, right? So that's why we all have to talk about this. This isn't, it crosses all socioeconomic lines, crosses all racial lines, crosses all gender lines. It's something that we all have to deal with. So that's why we all need to be educated so we can decrease our vulnerability. Okay? So any questions about any of that stuff that we just talked about? Why we're vulnerable, what we're doing, how we're counteracting that? Nope. Oh, I forgot to mention one thing. Oops. The third reason kids are vulnerable is because they're isolated from the people that can help them. That's why we have the support network, or the safety network. That's why we have kids know that wherever they are, school, church, soccer practice, home, neighborhood, friend's house, wherever, There's always at least one grown-up there that can help them stay safe. And that if they're feeling unsafe, they need to know who that grown-up is to go and tell them. Right? So that's going to decrease their isolation, which also decreases vulnerability. Lots of kids who are involved in a sexual relationship like this often feel very stuck. And oftentimes they're not let out of that person's grip, you know. Even when they're at school, they know they can't talk about it unless we tell them they can. Right? That this is a place we talk about this. This is a place we can get help. So that's what school needs to be. When you take your kids to the pediatrician, we do a lot of work with UC Health, with University Hospital. We're trying to get in and do some work with Kaiser so that those pediatricians and those doctors know, and even in emergency rooms, but even just regular old visits, the doctors know that they need to ask some questions, okay? When my daughter was about, she's been about 12, I think, 11 or 12. She was going to the doctor for the first time, you know, for girl things. And the nurse handed her this laminated piece of paper. You know, I was sitting in the room because I sat in the room when my kids were at the doctor and handed her this laminated piece of paper. It was a Kaiser doctor. And she started to read it out loud. And the nurse said, oh, no, just read that to yourself and then answer the questions. So I'm sitting there. I had no idea what was going on. I kind of did from the very first sentence that she read out loud, but I didn't say anything. I just sat there and she read the first question and she said no. Read the second question and she said yes. You know, I'm thinking, oh. So afterwards, you know, the nurse said, great, took the thing back. And then afterwards, I told them what I did for a living. That I wanted to see that because I was very impressed. And it asked, you know, is there anyone at your school or home making you feel unsafe? No. Do you have people you can talk to if you're feeling unsafe? Yes. You know, all of that, I was like, oh my God, that's so awesome. I jumped up and down and said, this is fantastic. So we need to make sure our doctors are asking too. One more port of entry where kids go that they can tell someone they're feeling unsafe, right? If they're asking. So we need to make sure we ask. Now, if you have a child that's exhibiting kind of strange behaviors, you're not sure what's going on, very simple question. Is there anything that's making you feel unsafe? We don't have to say, is someone touching your penis? Is somebody, you know, touching your whatever, you know, whatever. We don't have to say that. We can just say, hey, are you feeling safe? Or is there something going on at wherever that's making you feel unsafe? Kids get that, and they'll be able to talk with you about it, right? We don't have to assume that they're being sexually abused. Maybe something else is going on. Who knows? Maybe they have an older brother that's acting out at home and it scares them, okay? And if they talk to us about it, then we'll be able to give them some support. So we need to ask those questions, all right? So as far as the classroom workshop, for those of you who haven't seen it in their classroom, it's a lot of fun. The kids, I think, really enjoy it. We can tell by their big smiles on their faces, their participation, and how they feel afterwards. Again, it's an empowerment program, so they feel pretty good about themselves afterwards. And when we come into the classroom, we need to, does anybody know if there's been any, probably hasn't gone home yet, actually, yes, it did, because of tonight. Do you know if there's been any opt-outs? Do you have one? Okay. Has there been a call made home for them to come tonight?
I think Michelle's going to follow up.
Okay, great. So if we can say, come tonight, listen to what they're going to be talking about. We show them the entire kids workshop. Most of the time, if they see it and they hear it, they want their kid there. Maybe they just don't quite understand what it is that we're going to be doing. If there's a religious reason or other types of reasons that parents don't want their kids there, then that's understandable. But out of about 5,000 kids we serve in a year, we may have one or two kids that are opted out, and that's it. So if there's lots of opts out, they're thinking they're signing permission, and we need to call and make sure they understand what's happening, okay? So if we can make that phone call home before tonight to invite them, that would be awesome, okay? Let's see. If you do have that opt-out, we want to make sure that child is not present when we come into the classroom. So about 5 minutes before our scheduled time to be there, have them go to the neighboring classroom, to the library, wherever they can go to be supervised. So it's not your job to tell them why. That's their grown-ups' job. Their grown-ups have opted them out. You don't have to explain why they're not going to sit and have this fun experience with the rest of the kids, okay? So make sure we do that beforehand. We want to make sure the kids get water and drinks and bathroom and all that stuff done, hopefully, before we come. Now, if a child has to go to the bathroom, of course, we're going to let them. That's a basic human need. We're not going to deny them that. But we don't want all the kids jumping up and down every 2 seconds. Okay, so we start that, then it's like a snowball effect, and then everybody needs to go. Okay? We're going to sit in a semicircle in the classroom. So if you can move your chairs and desks out of the way, we want a big, giant area in the center. where they can sit on the floor, on their bottoms, with no one in front or behind anyone else. Now, you don't have 6th graders here anymore, right? Okay, so with your 5th graders, are they used to sitting on the floor? They are, okay, great. Oftentimes, they allow 6th graders to sit on, or 5th graders to sit on chairs. We let our middle schools do that. But if they're used to sitting on the floor, we would prefer them on the floor. We sit on a big sit bowl when we facilitate. The only time we stand above them is when we do our role plays, okay? We'll give them name tags. Allow us to do that because we get to go around and say hello to every student and start that rapport with them. So it's important for us to be able to do that. So we'll give them name tags. We need to have you in the room while we're doing the presentation. You can sit at your desk, you can read emails, you can grade papers. As long as you're sitting there, listening. It's really interesting sometimes to hear the answers and the responses to what the kids tell us and the questions we're asking, right? So it's good for you to just kind of sit and listen. You don't have to sit with the kids, and we actually prefer that you don't because we want to keep it at a child's level. Just yesterday, I had a teacher raise their hand and want to participate and ask a question or answer something. And they had their hand up, and and I didn't call on them. And she kept looking at me like, come on, you don't have my hand up. So then I had my other facilitator go over and just explain that we don't want grown-ups asking questions or responding in the middle of a kids' workshop. We will definitely, do that afterwards if she has a question or a concern. But we want to keep it at a kid's level. Sometimes that brings it up to a grown-up level. Okay? Let's see. If you have a child that has been removed for a disciplinary reason, let's say they're down visiting Michelle or someone, or they're in a group, a pull-out group or something, have them come back for this presentation. You're only going to get it once. So oftentimes those kids really need to hear some of this information. So we want to make sure that they're there for that, okay? If you have a student that's absent the day that we come, let's try to get them into another classroom. Either younger or older, 1 grade is fine. Let's make sure we get all the kiddos trained, okay? We do ask that you all participate in a role play with us. It's at the very end after we've done our bullying behavior, our stranger awareness, and our sexual abuse sections. We do guided group discussion, talk to them about their rights to be safe, strong, and free. We do an unsuccessful role play showing that issue being demonstrated. We sit down and strategize with them. We talk about what things can happen differently, teach them some skills they could use to stay safe, redo the role play again successfully, showing that issue being resolved, okay? We do that with each section. First 2 sections, bullying behavior, stranger awareness. We have kids from the class come up and participate in the successful role play, never in the unsuccessful, in the successful. They get to help us with those skills. Of course, last section, sexual abuse, we never have a student participate. That would not be okay. And so we do that ourselves. But right after the 3rd section is when you all get to come up on stage. They love this part of the program. They cheer your name, they clap, yay, Miss Jones, because you get to come up and participate in a role play. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, that's okay. You play yourself much better than we will. But if you don't want to, for whatever reason, just let us know. We will ask you, do you feel comfortable doing this? If you do, your lines are kind of on the back of the first page. You don't have to memorize it. You don't have to come up and read it. It's so funny. I love teaching. I consider myself an educator also. Teachers get so nervous. You don't do this every day, all day long. Right? But you get so nervous with this paper, and you're reading it. I am really glad you came and told me. That was a great break review. You don't have to do that. Use your own words. This is just an example of something we'd like for you to say. We'll prompt you with questions in case this doesn't come out, right? Main thing is, I'm so proud of you. You came to talk to me. I believe you, and we'll get you help. 3 main points, okay? Any way you want to say that is just fine. Oh, and we want to let kids know that we really don't want to talk about this in front of the whole class. This is a private conversation. So we would have you say, all the kids, all the other friends or students are right here. If you can wait just for a few minutes, they're about to go to recess. Why don't you hang back and we'll talk more then? Or they're going to go to lunch or art or whatever, okay? Whatever works in your schedule. And that way they know it's something that you may not be able to talk to them right that second, but you definitely want to, and you're going to arrange a time to do that with them when all the kids aren't present, okay? Last 15 minutes of the workshop is what we call review time, which is super important. It's unique to our program. And that after we've taught them, they have the right to tell if someone is, if they're feeling sad, scared, or unsafe, then we can't just, pack up our stuff and leave, right? We stick around. We go out into the hallway and we say to the students, if you have a question, a comment, or a connection to anything we talked about, we'd really like to hear about it. Now, you don't have to come if you don't want to. It's totally your choice. But if you'd like to, your teacher's going to say, does anybody want to talk to the CAP ladies? That's us. She's going to send out 2 at a time, or he is going to send out 2 at a time. And then you can just rotate in and out until everybody who wants to gets a chance. Don't make the kids come. Don't go around every table and say, okay, your turn, your turn, your turn, right? We want it to be a choice. Most of the time, the younger grades, almost all the kids come out and talk to us. That doesn't mean they're all being abused, right? Please don't think that you're going to think, oh my gosh, they're all being abused. They just want to, share experience with us. They want to ask us a what if question. I have a new baby brother at home. My most favorite one throughout the whole 26 years was, the little girl sat down and said, guess what? I said, what? We're getting new cabinets in our kitchen today. I'm like, wow. And I didn't really get that until I got new cabinets in my kitchen. I get it. I totally get it. So they just share stuff with us. We've just told them some really cool, empowering information, and they want to connect, and that's great. There may be a kid that comes out, though, and discloses something's going on. The last time we were here, I think we had 5 or 6 reports that we had to make either social services or the police. Again, we don't know if that's going to happen. It could happen. Maybe nothing happens, right, like that. But we want to make sure that we give that chance. So after the workshop, please don't send them to recess or start a math test, right? Do something where they feel kind of coming in and out of the classroom. They can work on homework. They can read. You can, read a book. However they feel like they can come in and out without disrupting what's going on, okay? It's super important. It usually takes 5, maybe 10 minutes at the most, even if all the kids come, because it's pretty quick. We get them in and out. If a child has disclosed, we are mandated reporters. We may or may not be able to tell you what's going on. It just depends on that child and the situation. If they don't want us to say anything, then we won't. Okay, it's really important to keep that confidential and respect that for them. You will know something's going on, right? And we always write up the report, and we'll give a copy to the administrator, to Michelle, to the principal here, and they'll have that for the file. It's important that you all know if social services is coming or whatever's happening, okay? We will ask the child, is there someone here at school that we can talk to about this so that once we're gone, you have that support? Oftentimes they will say their classroom teacher. So hopefully you feel comfortable with that they're going to come, and if they have a bad day or something's going on, that they're going to be able to come talk to you about what's happening, okay? We will bring you in on that conversation if they allow us to. We also do what's called bridging. Bridging is when it's not a reportable concern, but there is a concern. So we make sure that they have someone here at the school that they can help address that concern. We're not allowed to call parents. It's against our regulations for us to call parents, especially if there's a report. You can't do that, right? If you have to make a report, we do not call parents. You do not call parents. Authorities call parents, right? So, but a parent can call us all day long. They can email me. I get emails all the time, parents asking questions or having concerns. That's fine, and then I can address that. But we may need to pull you in so that you can call the parent if there's a bridging that needs to happen. Okay, makes sense? Yeah, let's see if I did everything here. I think I did everything on the first couple pages here, just to review. The rest of this is just for your information, things that you can do to continue the conversation with kiddos. There's some, I have a packet of activities, crossword puzzles, word searches. If y'all would like to have a packet of that, I can give that to Michelle, and you guys can make copies for your classroom just for extra free time stuff to continue the language, the conversation, using the words, safe, strong, and free, talking about rights, that kind of thing. So I will make sure I give one of those to Michelle before we're done here. And also, if you want to have a copy of this flyer, the body safety rules, I have a bunch of those as well. I'll put some of those on the table as you leave. You are welcome to pick one of those up for yourself, for your grandkids, for whoever you need, okay, for your classroom as well. Let's see, any questions about our classroom workshop and what we need from you all before we come? Okay, I think there's lots of information here about what to do if a child discloses. There's some reinforcement activities you can do throughout the year. And then again, of course, lots of resources at the back. Okay, there's lots and lots of resources if you need community support for a family. There's tons there you can look at. All right. Well, thank you all. I'm out of time. I'm past a few minutes. So if you have anything, oh, one last thing. Sorry, I always remember. If you have a student, if you have a student that you're concerned about, you can let us know. We're not going to do anything differently than we would have done before, other than just kind of pay attention to their behavior, to their affect. We may kind of listen to the things that they say out loud, just to kind of get a feel for maybe if there's that child that's going through something. And then when we do review time, if you know of a child that's having concerns, you can kind of encourage them to come out. Don't make them. Just say, hey, don't you want to go say hi to the CAP ladies? Go tell them thank you. You know, if you have that concern, so that we can just kind of ask them a couple of questions to see if we need to intervene. Okay? All right, I think that's it. I'll probably remember something as I walk away today, but if you have questions, we'll be around. We'll be in the teacher's lounge, hopefully. You have a teacher's lounge still that you go to? Okay. With COVID, everything is so crazy. I just don't even know anymore. So we'll be around, start the 22nd, and then come back the next week, and we'll be here through until spring break. All right? All right, thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. Hopefully we get a lot of parents tonight. That would be great.
I vote. We saw that one. Yes.
Oh my God.